Ministry of Public Works is financed and how it does its projects and its road work. So some people sometimes see the highway being repaired and wonder why is the highway being repaired and not the road in their district. And it's for those looking on from outside, and sometimes for some of us as well, it's pretty much a convoluted process as to who is financing what and what funds can be used for what. If someone can explain for the benefit of those listening and clear up this confusion as to how are roads financed, how do you use the facilities and the rules that relate to what funds you can use for what, from what facility, it might take the Barbadian public a long way to understanding the priority of roads being fixed and how some roads that appear to be in better condition than others are fixed when others take a longer time. So can somebody please explain that?
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. Again, we have the full team from the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources. Just to say in the opening, Mr. Minister, that I agree with you that there needs to be some clarity as to how roads are prioritized. I think that it is fair to say that we have not seen the level of road construction and reconstruction done over the course of the previous decade. And therefore, there are a lot of roads that needed to be prioritized within the last few years. That work has started, but it also requires us to be able to access different levels of funding, international funding, and also for the Ministry of Finance to allocate the necessary funds to the ministry in order to, in a sense, keep up with the level of infrastructure that is required. I'm going to ask Mr. Philip Tudor, who is the Deputy Chief Technical Officer, to just speak in more detail to how exactly the priorities are made within the ministry.
Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister, colleagues. In terms of the priority, we normally deal with the first priority is the highways. Those are the roads that take on the majority of traffic. And then we come to the secondary roads and then the tertiary roads like tenantry roads and those kinds of roads. We try to fix the worst roads first. The problem is that most of the roads in Barbados are bad. In 2017, there was a IRAP project in which 30% of the roads were considered to be in good to fair condition, while the remaining 70% of the roads were in poor to very poor condition. So we have been trying to play catch up over the years. However, within the last year or two, we have had a substantial input of funding. For example, during this current financial year, we spent $16.3 million on the repairs of roads throughout the island. Of that 16.3, 52 community roads were done, which represents 39%, 52 community roads out of 135 community roads were done. The community roads were roads submitted by the 30 representatives. And most those community roads are roads in the residential and tenantry roads that were completed. So that's $16.3 million that was spent on those roads. Right? We also had the CAF program, of which 11 out of 62 roads were done. That represents 80% of the CAF roads. Now the CAF roads, let me hasten to say, the CAF roads are those roads which are of length 1 kilometer or longer. So anytime you go over 1 kilometer, those roads were the roads that were placed in the CAF program. You would notice that over the year, we did roads, as I said, the community districts. We started out in the south, and we were moving towards the north. So you would have seen roads, residential roads, being done in Christchurch, St. Philip, parts of St. Michael, St. James, and we were heading north with that program. So just wanted to say that although we have not reached, for example, certain areas of St. Thomas, We did some roads in St. George, but we've not completed everything. We've only done, like I said, 39% of the roads so far. But hopefully, within another year or so, we would more or less we would have constructed the majority of those community roads that are in poor to very poor condition. I don't know if that answers your question.
Kind of. I was hoping for a little bit more depth in terms of the allocation of funds so that people understand what the depot is responsible for, what kind of roads or what kind of repairs the depot is responsible for, and just an explanation basically that if you have a facility like the CAF roads, that if you have roads approved under a certain program, that you can't then just substitute any other road within that program. I think people don't understand why it is that we can't take the money from, instead of doing a highway, right, do 10 community roads instead. That's what I was getting at.
The votes are constructed. You have a vote for tenant roads. You have a vote for residential roads. Tenant roads votes is usually around $1 million. Residential roads is around $6 million, right? Highway construction and maintenance is generally we get the most money for that. Those are the roads that we...
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sorry. Right. We have various votes in which funds are allocated. For example, we have the tenant road vote. That's normally around $1 million allocated for that. We have the highway, we have the residential road vote, which is another $1 million allocated for that. Highway construction and maintenance is generally around $5 million or so allocated to the highway construction and maintenance. Then we have the Scotland District vote, which is around $1.5 to $2 million. So we have specific monies that are allocated to various votes within the ministry's allocation. Within the ministry's allocation, sorry. If we want to do more tenant roads, sometimes we have to vary money from one vote to put it into the next vote in order for us to do those roads. I dare say, though, that the allocations that we get, for example, residential roads, if you get $1 million in residential roads, some roads cost $1.5 million, $2 million. So the area where you have to scratch your head is to determine which road can be done with this amount of money that you get, right? So the allocation isn't always sufficient, that we need to do as many roads as we like. And that's why I suspect that over the years, 70% of the roads have become poor to very poor condition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Blessed good morning to everyone. I wished at the outset to express my gratitude to the staff at the depot at Bagatelle over the years for literally pulling their hair out of their heads to ensure that the roads in St. Thomas are upgraded to an extent and that there's an element of safety. And I also want to add my gratitude, or words of gratitude, to those gentlemen and ladies who are working in the special project to help to upgrade the highway. We in Barbados are extremely aware as to what takes place in rural Barbados in particular, but with this time I'm referring to St. Thomas. I have had rain, I've seen the rainfall in St. Thomas since Thursday morning, and it's still falling. So we know the degradation of the roads, particularly now that plantations had gone ahead, and rather than have the gutters at the sides of the road to take away the water, the drainage, for the drainage purposes, they all filled up the land to the highway where they could get in the various pieces of equipment during the crop season at that time over the years. And so all that water is now running on the road and doing severe damage to the roadside. I want to find out what can be done for the people of St. Thomas, and I'm not a person who focuses on myself at all, but there's so much dissatisfaction, so much criticism, cursing, insulting. I've never carried insults like these yet in my young age. And I really am very concerned that the roads in St. Thomas have been neglected for so long under an administration from 2008. When I spoke to the Honourable Minister then, who was the member for Christchurch South, and the men were on the road with everything to pave that road running from Edge Hill through by BRC up through Shop Hill. The equipment was there, everything was there, and the minister called to say, don't touch that road for Shido, because she had 14 years to do it. Can you imagine that we reduce politics to the destruction of people in this country? I do not believe in that kind of damage when it comes to politicians trying to cite how to destroy people in a community because they remain faithful to a Barbados Labour Party. I am sure that it is happening in the entire north of Barbados. We have problems with water on a long period of time. We have problems with the roads. We have problems with transportation. And somehow we seem to be the outside children. Well, I am happy that this government has sought to make some injections in helping us in rural Barbados, particularly in the northern part, to be able to have water more accessible, to be able to upgrade roads. But I'm focusing particularly on St. Thomas because I'm the voice for the people after 20 years. And I am hurting to know that we have reached the stage where this morning, yesterday, Saturday, all kinds of calls coming in, letters are coming in again because the rain has now taken away all of the patching material and so on. Water is running on the road, and we have a serious problem in the parish. I drive there every day, sometimes 4 times a day. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would like to know what plans the Ministry of Public Works and Maintenance have for St. Thomas so that I can at least bring an element of ease. There's too much expense with vehicles that are being destroyed. You can get to nowhere in the parish. That is one of the parishes that has about 8 to 10 places of interest where persons come on a daily basis. Welchmont Gully, Harrison's Cave, the Highland Outdoor Tours, Mount Hillaby. There's no road at all that can take people there with an element of safety, and the poor people are all marooned in there when there is heavy rain. I would like to know what plans the ministry has to be able to mitigate some of the challenges that we are facing in northern Barbados, but particularly now in St. Thomas, that for me is the worst set of roads you could ever want in the parish. The MTW depot members are trying, but they cannot do it all. And therefore, I would like to hear, sir, what is happening for us that are taxpayers like anybody else in this country. I thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, let me just say that I have listened to her year after year make the cry on behalf of the people of St. Thomas in relation to these roads. And just this morning, I reminded the team that the Honourable Member was more than likely going to raise the issue again. On this occasion, I can say to the Honourable Member, she and I have spoken in relation to doing a visit to the area to see the true extent of the roads. But I think it goes without saying, even without a visit, that the representations that have been made over the years are a cause for concern. Let me just indicate to her and to the residents of St. Thomas that in this upcoming financial year, the following roads are due to be done under the CAF program and will be given the necessary priority. And this is the road from Shop Hill to Content, the area from Cane Garden to Bridgefield, the Canewood to Prout Junction, and Hangman Hill in St. Thomas as well. Now, I want to make the point that just, and as was stated earlier, in terms of the cost of these roads, it is quite significant. It's over $1 million in most cases. In some, it is 1.3. 1.5, and therefore it paints a picture of obviously the condition of the road given the level of expenditure that will now have to be laid out on the roads. The truth of the matter is that as the heavy rains come, St. Thomas, like a number of the other parishes in the countryside, are impacted even with all the best intentions from the depots. And so I think we will have to make these areas a priority given the fact that we expect, obviously, especially with climate change, that we're going to obviously see heavier rainfall over the course of the next few years. But I want to give the assurance to the the people of St. Thomas that we will try our best in this financial year to give that necessary priority to you. I'm going to ask Mr. Chuda to perhaps give some background on the roads in St. Thomas generally, since he's been obviously working on the projects there for a much longer period. Mr. Chuda?
Yes, Deputy Prime Minister. As you said earlier, those are the 4 roads to be done on under the CAF program, and each of them costs around between $1.2 and $1.5 million to be done, and that is one of the reasons why we have not been able to tackle those roads any sooner than now. We're expecting to get funds from under the CAF program. In addition to the works that are planned on those 4 roads, we plan to improve the drainage because you would appreciate with climate change, a lot of the drains are too small to accommodate the kinds of rainfall that we are seeing these days. So we are doing not only the paving and reconstruction of the roads where necessary in those areas, but also improving the drainage, as well as in some areas providing additional footpath for the students that have to traverse those roads. As I said before, the money was never there before to tackle the roads as we would have liked. And in the ministry, we don't like doing halfway jobs. So either we do the job to the full extent that it needs to be done, or we wait till when the funds are available to do it. In terms of the background, I've been there for 35 years, and I've never really seen this kind of money being spent as we are seeing now, and I'm grateful for that, because as I said before, it has been here scratching money that we've been getting, and you don't know where to start, which road to start on, and things like that. So we're happy now that funds are finally being accessible to do the major repairs that are needed throughout the island.
Mr. Trudeau, just to add to that, I think that your last point is particularly significant because the public needs to be mindful that this amount of funding has never been allocated to roads. And so while the Honourable Member is correct in saying that there are plenty of roads in St. Thomas that needs to be done, again, I think it is particularly important to note that we are now accessing the funds. We couldn't do so in 2018, 2019, but we're now in a better position financially to be able to access the resources to be able to get the projects going.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister and Deputy Chief. I will accept your assurances, and I look forward to that kind of assistance for those residents. My second query is to do with road signage. I do not understand how the Ministry of Public Works, I call it still, is organized, because I get the impression that very little or nothing is being done about road signage. So we have bus stops that have been uprooted, signs have fallen down from communities. We cannot say we are a people who are planning to develop our tourism product or to be able to make sure that locals in particular get the understanding as to how things are working. And so I would like to find out what plans there are for road signage. Your Honor, I did not ask your permission, but I know that there was a project when the former member of staff, Mr. Cedric Archer, had done a project, and we were able to see where we were going because of how Barbados is, the demographic shifts are coming. And there are communities you can't tell where you're going unless you know where is so-and-so avenue and so-and-so heights and so on. I am seeing a lot of challenges where that is concerned. I would really like to find out what plans there are, not only in rural Barbados, but across the length and breadth of Barbados, where we have the challenges and those signs that were put up to show where places like Harrison's Cave and Welchman Hall Gully and strictly St. Thomas today, sir, forgive me, and so on. Those signs and so have, those big signs have now all fallen apart. And I believe some of them were put on the plywood back in, and therefore with the termites and so eating them away. But I have no signs in the parish when persons are coming there on a daily basis to be able to access. And the final one, in relation to it, is to do with pedestrian crossings. I did speak to the former Honourable Minister to ask him to see how best we can do a sensitization project on how to use roundabouts. I am the biggest critic of pedestrian crossings in roundabouts. And now that we are talking about $30,000 are on the, 30,000 cars on the road that are not properly licensed or insured or whatever, then you understand the volume. When I saw what was coming here this morning, when I was coming here, I can tell that we do have a lot of challenges. But a pedestrian crossing in a roundabout, by the time you get the tail of your car around the roundabout, persons are crossing. And I would not like for anybody to get injured. And so I would like to find out, what are the plans going forward now that we've got so many other thousands of vehicles on the road? And what plans are there when it comes to people retraining? Young people are learning to drive. What are we doing to be able to sensitize the public? How are we using the public forum that we have with the television and the social media and so to let people know these are what you do on the road? I thank that gentleman who comes on the program every morning to Jordan, Mr. Jordan, to remind Barbadians that they're not on racetracks. We're having too many accidents. People are badly injured. And I believe that we need to get to road signage, even if we have to put it in the air, as we see it internationally, because we are international now. I would just like to find out that one, sir, if you will allow the officers, the distinguished officers, to give me some answers on that particular query.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Honourable Member for St. Thomas. I just want to just allow you to know that I share your pain, I share your concern. Certainly as it relates to the condition of the roads in the north, in St. Thomas, and in the neighboring constituency of St. Andrew. I think we would have suffered the same fate, and for mainly one reason, and that was our staunch support of a particular party, of this party. And we would have been left forsaken for so many years. So I understand what you're going through in St. Thomas. We've been going through it in St. Andrew for a long time. So it also pleases my heart to see the efforts that are being made this time around to ensure that those roads that have been neglected for so long are now getting some much needed attention. And for us in the rural spaces, it really is a special feeling when we see roads in our communities being paved. It's perhaps hard to describe coming from anywhere else, because we normally see investments in infrastructure being focused in the urban spaces, in the industrial areas, but we have always been the last to receive these investments and receive this attention. So I know how you feel. I know how the good people in St. Thomas feel, because the good people in St. Andrew and St. Peter and St. Lucy and St. Joseph and St. John, they all feel the same way. But I said some time ago, and I think that my words are just as current now as they were then, that this is our season. This certainly and really is the season for the north, for the rural parishes to receive some love and attention. So you can rest assured that this ministry would work hard to ensure that the people of St. Thomas will get some relief. I will allow the minister to speak some more about our National Signage Improvement Program, which will also answer your second concern.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary, for that intervention. Honourable Member, just to say to you in relation to the National Signage Project, again, this is a concern that we all share, having driven across the countryside. Certainly when I was with the Parliamentary Secretary, not only was I concerned about signage, but I was also concerned about the conditions of the roadside. And we've asked for particular attention to be paid to the roadways, ensuring that as whether locals or tourists are traversing the roads, that the areas are free of bush and debris. And that program has started certainly in those areas and will continue. In particular, in relation to the signage, that is a concern too, not only for the tourists coming to Barbados, because Barbados cannot only be for tourists, Barbados is also for locals. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that we have proper signage, that people know where they are traveling to, and where they need to get to. As a consequence, there is a national signage improvement project that is on the way. I will ask the Chief Technical Officer to basically speak to it a bit more, but just to give you the assurance as well that that is certainly high priority for this financial year.
Honourable Minister, before the response from the Chief Technical Officer, a very important point was raised, which I want to be addressed at some point in time during the course of this session, with the bus stops and so on that are on the ground. It is causing serious problems for our commuters, where they're being taken away. Imagine a pensioner being taken away, parked to the next bus stop, because the bus stop where she would normally get off at is fallen, and there's some drivers out there, as long as they don't see a bus stop, they're not going to stop. So I need that this particular aspect, not just including the signage raised by the Honourable Member, but in terms of bus stops and stop signs and all of that, to be addressed as a matter of urgency. You may now proceed. Thanks, Minister. Honourable Member.
Cheryl Van Ennis, Chief Technical Officer, Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. First off, since you referred to the project when we first started a signage project under the past CTO, Mr. Cedric Archer, that was completed quite well, that first phase of it was completed quite successfully, and we had hoped that we were going to be able to continue that. That was done in partnership with the private sector as well. And we are, shall we say, we're restarting that project. I want to start a little bit first, and let me deal with the bus stops and the other signs that you see that might be lying on the ground or hanging off the poles. We have 13 depots all over Barbados, and their responsibility, the officers there, the technicians, they know their area of responsibility that's attached to each depot. And they move around, and when they notice that there's a bus stop down or a sign broken or whatever the case may be, they record it, and then it is sent to our road signage team, let's call it that. We used to have about 3-4 teams, but again, the retrenchment and the lack of financial resources means that we're only down to 1 team now. That 1 team is based at the Richmond Depot, and all those reports go into the Richmond Depot. But with 1 team, you could therefore imagine the amount of requests that they get for signs to both manufacture and erect those signs and replace signs. So we are still working on it. We've never stopped working on doing our signage project and repairing signs and such things like that. But obviously, we're moving a lot slower now because we only have 1 team. We also, when resources allow, we purchase materials overseas. The signs that are largely made in the depot at Richmond are wooden and hand-painted, but we also do aluminum signs, metal signs, which are far more durable, and we can also make those reflective because we purchase the reflective material. That is our desired standard of sign, but again, as I said, resources limited, so we do a mixture. So the signs that are bus stops and that sort of thing, if you call it into the depot that's closest to where that bus stop is or whatever sign it is, that depot relays it to the Richmond Depot, which is the center of our manufacturing and replacement of those signs, and in the order in which the request has come in, then they deal with it, and we re-erect, change, replace, or what have you. I want to share as well that there is a variety of signs that the ministry is responsible for. We talked about bus stops, but there are other regulatory signs. You mentioned some of them, the stop signs, give way signs. We also have the road name signs. We have, excuse me, we have the direction signs. These are the large green and white or black and white signs that you'll see at intersections that actually direct you where you're going. We have confirmation signs. These are the little 3-by-1 foot signs that you will see when you get to Fitz Village, for instance, that confirm that you have reached the area that you've been looking for. And of course, we do the roundabout signs, the name signs that go into the roundabouts, the chevron boards that detect when there's a sharp curve in the road. All of those are signs that our ministry is responsible for. The signs at the pedestrian crossings that you spoke about. The team also does the road markings. This is actually put in, and that is a part of signs on the ground. Those are also the signs that we put on the ground. And we do that either manually using locally manufactured road marking paint, and we also have one thermoplastic team that is a specially manufactured outside of Barbados, of course, material that lasts longer, and we tend to put that on our major highways, the ABC highway and stuff like that. So there's a lot of work that we have been doing with our signage, and as I said, we are in the process of redoing or bringing back the signage project, where we'll be working with hopefully private sector again that will help us financially to sponsor some of the signs that I just spoke about. And that's how we hope to eventually sign Barbados the way it should be signed. So that project is coming back, and we hope that we'll make inroads in this as the resources allow. Oh, I want to mention, because I think there was something specifically about marking pedestrian crossings close to roundabouts. This comes up often. The reality is this. If you're a pedestrian, and we all have to be pedestrians when we get out of our car, we become pedestrians. We're not all motorists. If we're lucky enough to have the use of our legs, then we are a pedestrian. And if you're going to be walking, you would come to the corner, and that's where you want to cross. You tend to want to cross at the closest point that's going to minimize your distance that you're walking. The roundabout is an intersection. As a crossroad, as a T-junction, it's an intersection. So the pedestrian crossings are placed as close to the intersection as possible, but in as safe a location as possible. And I know motorists talk about the fact that, they get to a roundabout and a crossing is in front of them, and then just as they're leaving the roundabout, there's another crossing. That's because there are people that are crossing at that intersection. It's an intersection, and you're supposed to approach the intersection at a reasonable speed and not race through it. You wouldn't race through a four-crossroad junction. You certainly shouldn't. So why do you think you need to race through the roundabout? It is an intersection. So the point that we mark the pedestrian crossing is actually the slowest, it's the point at which the vehicle tends to be moving the slowest. We have been fortunate in Barbados, and Barbados is not the only country in the world that uses roundabouts. They're all over London, for instance. I think they're the experts in roundabouts. And yes, they're marked in pretty much the same location as they're marked in Barbados. Right? We did not invent it, but that's what the technical information and the studies have proven, that marking them at that location is the safest place to mark them. What all motorists and all road users need to do is to remember they're not the only ones on the road. They don't own the space on the road, and they have to learn to be vigilant and watch out for those who are more vulnerable. And that includes pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, right? So that is the responsibility as a road user. And on the other hand, pedestrians shouldn't just get to a crossing and run across, not waiting to make sure that the motorist has seen them first before they step out. So we have a responsibility when we're moving about on the roads, all of us as road users. I think I might have covered everything between the two queries on things.
You would have covered everything, and you were given an extended period of time to
Thank you so much.
respond. So we will now have to.
You asked, and I delivered.
Honourable Member, you would have given all three questions already, based. you asked about the signage and then the use of the roundabouts. Yeah, you may go. Proceed. Yes.
Thank you, sir. My final question is associated with the PSVs. And I want to know what plan there is properly in informing the public. It is only a matter of time before we lose more people lose their lives, or they get serious injury with what I'm experiencing now. And while I commend those who have been conforming with the law, I have a tremendous difficulty where I knew that in the past there were officers from the Ministry of Public Works wearing those creamish uniforms, and they helped to stabilize what has been happening, but I have not been seeing them anymore. I understand there are only 2 now on staff, but 2 cannot carry the challenges that we are facing with the high element of disrespect and disorderly behavior that we witness every minute of the day with the PSVs. Not so much the yellow buses, although they too now have something that you call dragging, where it took me almost 45 minutes to get from Old Town down to Black Rock. And if that is only the one time I was there, I've not traveled back there then really because of the nonsense. I want to find out what government is doing in helping with the training of those workers to let them understand that they're granting a service to the public that doesn't have to travel with them unless they're like the ones in St. Thomas, where I see 2 big yellow buses on a Sunday where nobody is traveling as such because you can't go to church anymore. The old people will take it to church. But every minute of the day now, the ZRs from Jackson are plying the St. Thomas route. And they're not plying it with driving with any orderly aspect of what should be happening. But they're speeding and trying to cut out one another all through the Vault Road where I live. They know where I live now because I stopped one last week to say, this is a peaceful village. The pa cannot work. You're doing it. You're going from the wrong side of the road. You're passing out the yellow buses. It really is a very frightening experience now. Who can answer me, because the Transport Authority does not seem to have the authority that has been vested in it. The ACTO folks, I called one of our former members of Parliament, whom I understand is in a leadership position, and I'm not getting any proper response. And the final aspect of my question is, so that is the off-route ones, but the other final part of my question is, Warren's area. I want to thank the honourable member who was the former minister up until recently for helping to upgrade that road. But there has to be some kind of order there outside of the polyclinic at the Eunice Gibson, where people are walking with canes, they're in wheelchairs and so on to cross the road. Not everybody has transportation. And those ZRs from the Jackson route in particular are blocking the exit from the community. I'm going to try to remember the name now. When you come through from the old cigarette factory, the young folks wouldn't know that. To come out by the Warren's Polyclinic, that Lodge Terrace Road, that is being blocked. Persons cannot exit. They can only make the left turn out now. And then there are 3 and 4 up to the gate of the Polyclinic. And all you say, I have the pictures, I have the information, I don't know what to do with it now. Nobody seems to have an answer. I would like to find out what is the plan for us going forward, where we can make sure that the lives of people, including those who are about their business, to wherever, because that section of the road now, of the highway, is really like Bridgetown. So massive levels of traffic, people crossing and there are some persons who are selling outside the bus stop and the crossing too. I would like to know what plans the ministry has for it. I have no alternative but to pass there daily as many thousands of other persons do. And I would like to know that the safety of all Barbadians is looked after in a way that can be changed, and for what can be done about those PSVs that are off route and driving so dangerously. Thank you, sir.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Member of Parliament. Let me just say that we did address this on Friday. I think Ms. Rufolder would have spoken extensively to what some of the challenges are, but also some of the solutions that we are in the process of undertaking in relation to PSVs. There are some regulations that would have been approved by Cabinet, I believe, about a year ago. There have been extensive discussions since then with the various stakeholders. There's been some fine-tuning of those regulations, and immediately after the estimates, it is my intention to be able to bring those back with a view to giving some teeth to the Transport Authority so that the enforcement that is now necessary to take place, that they will now have that going forward. But the concerns are very real. I think the general public is very acutely aware of the issues on the roads. The regulations will speak to a number of the things which drivers are required to do, but it also places an onus on the owners of the vehicles who for a long time have been pretty much in the background and have in a sense been able to escape being identified or even having the permits taken away because of the errors being made by their drivers. And so the intention is to be able to start to clamp down to ensure that the drivers are properly trained. We've been in discussions with the Barbados Community College to ensure that the standards that are required, that those persons who are currently drivers will be able to participate in that program when it is rolled out. Also that persons who are new entrants as public service vehicle drivers, that those persons also will now have to undertake a course of training before they are unleashed into the public as well. And so that process has already started in terms of identifying the persons who are necessary to train the individuals, but also having those discussions with the stakeholders. And I would anticipate that very shortly we would be in a position to roll that out. I will ask the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Cummins, to just speak briefly to the inspectors and the issues with the inspectors.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you, Honourable Member, for your question. You are correct. There has been a significant reduction in the number of transport inspectors. Certainly in the last 4 years since I was there, we've had 3 transport inspectors retiring. Fortunately, only, was it last week? Week before, I saw the circular came out from the People Resources and Compliance Department asking for soliciting applications from persons who are interested in becoming a transport inspector. So hopefully we will have that complement bump back up to the 5 very shortly. But even with the 5 in place, and I want to focus on the Warrens area of which you spoke, because you're 100% correct. I've been observing that intersection. I've asked the Chief Licensing Officer to send an inspector there. When the inspector is there, there is improvement, but as soon as the inspector moves, we go back to the chaos. You have vending there, you have coconut vending, you have regular vending, you have, as you said, the double parking, triple parking. Sometimes you have the linear parking, and along with all the traffic flows, persons going into the polyclinic, persons going into the other medical building, which is I think that's the Diabetic Association. You have the Red Cross in there. So it is a junction that needs proper order. But we are moving to have the post of transport inspector fill, and hopefully sometime during the new financial year, you will see them back on the road doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. Thanks for raising it.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and good morning to everybody. I want to draw our attention to the situation at the Transport Board, where mention was made last Friday of progress being made towards the implementation of a mass transit. And we were hearing that progress is in an advanced stage. I'm wondering if we can get some clarification or expansion on that particular point. The second question that I would wish to raise relates to the Barbados Water Authority. When the government came to power, this particular government in 2018, there had to be a massive undertaking to get rid of sewage on the South Coast. And at the time, it caused for massive investment. And the public is still paying for that with the imposition of a tax and so on. And we can actually see how the money is being spent. There would be some concern that we have to avert a situation where we have to revert to mass or massive spending to correct a problem. Instead, we should be turning our attention to maintaining or being proactive so that we can avoid problems occurring. And part of the problem or part of the situation at the time was that the Water Authority did not have the requisite equipment in place to undertake a lot of the work. Renting the equipment, particularly to address the concerns of sewage, is a very expensive undertaking. I wonder if the ministry could comment on what is being done to procure equipment, not only for sewage. My question specifically is for that, but for sewage and other things to ensure that the Barbados Water Authority can function and that we would not have to find ourselves in a situation where we are referring to contracting out work that costs the government a tremendous amount of money. Investment in equipment, though expensive, in the long run may be a better alternative. At least that's one perspective. So I wonder if your ministry would want to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, to deal with the first issue of the Barbados Mass Transit Authority, in speaking about it being at an advanced stage, I'm sure that you are concerned because the unions have not yet been consulted, and that is perfectly correct. But in terms of the position of Cabinet in moving this whole thing forward, Cabinet has agreed, obviously, to set up the framework for that to be done. We have engaged the services of a transport consultant to be able to advise the ministry and indeed the minister in relation to how that is to be rolled out, and obviously then to engage in discussions thereafter with the relevant stakeholders. So from our end, the initial discussions with internal ministry have already started over the course of the last few weeks, and at the appropriate time we will then start the engagement with the wider stakeholders to be able to look at the framework for how the Barbados Mass Transit Authority is intended to be rolled out. In relation to your second question, I'm going to ask Mr. Halliday from the Barbados Water Authority, the General Manager, to just speak to the issue of the South Coast Sewage Project.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Good morning, everyone, colleagues. Just in terms of responding to Minister Moore's questions, in looking at the South Coast sewage, yes, that has been a massive undertaking that the Barbados Water Authority would have engaged in. And part of the solution to that was the GSC contribution or levy that has paid dividends and that has allowed us to move to the point where we are no longer having to subsidize significantly so the maintenance of the wastewater division, other than for the large or significant capital works. You're correct in saying that we have suffered from a lack of equipment over the years. We are not in a position to fund the maintenance as we would have wanted to, or the replacement of equipment. In fact, across the Barbados Water Authority, we have suffered from age equipment, which is in excess, in most instances, of 7 years. And during the course of last year, we were finally able to make the decision to move forward, and to move forward for the procurement or for the replacement of most of the vehicles that we need, most of the equipment, including the specialized equipment, and in some areas to also augment where we were lacking additional equipment, even in terms of our distribution crews, which would have declined significantly over the years. So our goal really over the next several months is to ensure that we get those numbers back up to the numbers that will allow us to be able to respond
to the needs of the country, particularly we're talking about burst means, we're talking about repairs, we're talking about capital works, private developments, and so on. We have been challenged to be able to respond in those areas, even when it comes to first-time installation of services. Going back to the South Coast sewage and the equipment, yes, we have ordered the necessary equipment that we would need. Unfortunately, these processes take a lot of time. We are aware of the global issues. In some instances, we're waiting for as much as 9 months to be able to get some of that equipment. But that equipment has been ordered substantially so. Even when you're talking about camera equipment, we've had challenges back and forth where that equipment has not necessarily been as readily accessible as it should be. We have, in the interim, had to engage private contractors to do some of the work. The BWA was simply not in a position to do all of the work because we don't have all of the equipment. So the blunt question, or the short answer rather to your question is that yes, we have had to engage private contractors. Yes, we've had to hire equipment. Yes, we've had to do such like to make sure that we can maintain some order of semblance to be able to respond and to deal with the needs of the Barbados Water Authority on an ongoing basis. As we move forward, we anticipate that with the purchase of equipment, that need would be less. The challenge that we're seeing, however, is that BWA is engaged significantly so on quite a number of projects. We're talking about all of the projects that are related to works. We're talking about all of the significant upgrade of facilities. We're talking about water augmentation, whether it's in the east, whether it's in the north, or whatever the case may be. We're talking about refurbishment of all of our reservoirs, in some instances replacing or augmenting from the point of view of redundancy. And if it is that we are going to be dealing with all of these projects, most of which are running concurrently or will overlap, we still anticipate that we'll both need to outsource some areas or some projects or assistance for some projects, and that realistically we will not have all of the equipment to tackle all of the projects at the same time. So I'm hoping that that answers your question and gives some sense of perspective to what's currently happening at the BWA. Thank you.
Thanks for your answer, but only to a certain extent, because I'm not clear whether you have answered that in the pieces of equipment being procured, specifically the equipment to address the South Coast issue has been ordered. But the other thing that I would say is that since 2018, there has been a commitment to procure equipment that you are now saying has taken up to 9 months. So it would suggest that efforts were not undertaken in the interest of expediency to order the equipment on time. And the hope would be that, yes, we recognize that contractors and work would have to be subcontracted out, but the hope would be that we don't have a body of workers available to work, but because at whatever level we are failing in our effort or responsibility to get the requisite equipment in on time, that we then find ourselves using it as an occasion to engage contractors in work that otherwise Water Authority should be doing if every attempt is being made to ensure that the tools and equipment that are needed for them to undertake their work are being properly procured by government. I think it's in the public interest too, because the experience with contracts is that contracts often cost a lot more, especially when those contracts tend to go into overruns. And in the case of the Water Authority, we see it quite often where work that is contracted out ends up taking a whole lot longer, and obviously the costs associated with those are the costs that the public then would have to carry. So I just want to, that's more comment, to ensure that we are treating to the issue with expediency and don't find ourselves into contracts that are costing us and burdening us more than otherwise they should.
Mr. Chair, let me just clarify, though. I think the honourable member, in speaking to the issue of the urgency, needs to be reminded that in the period after 2018, there would have been obviously challenges in terms of the financial issues, making sure that the appropriate financing was available to the Barbados Water Authority. That's not an overnight process. There were many years of not being able to have the necessary resources to invest in water. Once those funds became available, and I won't sit here and say that the Barbados Water Authority has expedited on everything in the best way. I will never say that in relation to government. But at the same time, I think it is fair to say that we've all been through a pandemic, and we have been privy to the fact that there have been shortages of supplies. There have been issues in terms of shipments of things coming into the island. And with all the best efforts at times, the time frames for the delivery of a number of the items coming in has had to be very protracted. As a consequence, it has impacted, obviously, the ability of the Barbados Water Authority to fulfill its obligations to the public and indeed to the unions in relation to this issue. That being said, I do agree that we have a responsibility as government to make sure that we have the necessary oversight over these projects, to make sure that they are expedited as quickly as they possibly can once the playing field is level and once all of the factors line up to be able to allow us to do so. But we cannot, on the other hand, stop people from getting water to their taps. We have to basically make sure that if there are other persons out there who have equipment or contractors who are able to provide the services, that our first priority has to be to get running water to people. It has to be to replace the mains to make sure that people can have, instead of brown and brackish water coming through their taps, or no water at all. It cannot be a discussion on whether we've outsourced the work, but rather how do we get the work expedited in as quick a manner as possible. And lastly, the fact that we have so many projects, as the General Manager has indicated earlier, I think must say to the country that the Barbados Water Authority was not built, in a sense, to do these number of projects, and therefore there is going to have to be training of staff, retraining and retooling of staff, even when the equipment comes, and that's not going to be an overnight process either. So there has to be a relationship with the unions and certainly the workers that appreciates the time that we are in at this point in time, appreciates that there are different interests, but I hope that we can find a medium where we put the people of Barbados first, who in many cases are not getting running water to their taps at this point in time.
Chair, wish to thank the honourable member for a political response, but hoping too that recognition will be given to the fact that the honourable member, this one, is speaking on behalf of St. George North and the wider Barbados public, and not simply the unions of Barbados. And also that our interests, even wearing a union hat, converge in terms of getting water to the public. I certainly spend enough time in St. John to know what it means not to have running water and the urgency of that. And hopefully we will address the issues. I also want us to be mindful that a pandemic started at the end of 2019, and the pandemic cannot be the source and the cause of all the challenges that we are facing. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Chairman, I raised to move that you now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be suspended for a period of 30 minutes.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended for 30 minutes. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended for 30 minutes.